Hello and welcome to season 3 of Financial Secrets Revealed podcast, where this season I am meeting the experts. And the expert who joins me today from stateside is the lovely Scherrie Prince, who is an asset protection attorney, I can't even speak properly, and a podcaster. Welcome to the show, Scherrie.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Glad to be here.
Now, estate planning probably isn't something that pops to mind when you're thinking about investing or getting ahead financially. So, why is it so often forgotten by people, and how important is it when we're discussing our wealth?
Well, a lot of times we're so focused on building the wealth. Once we get it, we try to enjoy the wealth. Well, there's an additional step to it, and it's not the sexiest. So, it's not like when you're
True.
making all the money. Right. And so definitely asset protection is something it does not have to be complicated, but it's actually something that's necessary.
So, what's your background in estate planning and asset protection? How did all this get started for you?
Okay, I'm going to try to give you the Cliff Notes version. But I got to give you a little background first. So I grew up with my grandparents primarily on a 150 plus acre farm. They died without a will or a trust. And now my mother had passed away before her parents. So by the time they passed away, I inherited a portion of my mother's land and so did my brother. So fast forward, we had a big family debacle in terms of who got what. There were some other things that happened. And at the time, I was not an attorney. I did have an MBA. I ran a couple of businesses, but it really caused me to look at the issues that happen when you die without a will or trust. So fast forward around 30, I went to law school and I have been helping business owners, secure their personal finances, but also merge their business plan with their estate plan so that they can have legacy and generational wealth.
So, you've seen firsthand, I suppose, when things aren't written and put in place in a
Exactly.
legal manner, how
Exactly.
people can miss out or that the deceased wishes aren't carried out. An awful lesson to have to learn in your own family.
It really was. But I found out that I was not special. This happens in a lot of families. And sometimes people go too soon. And when I say too soon, my mother passed away when she was 36. But she
Wow.
had been sick most of my life. So, can you imagine a 30-year-old really thinking about long term care insurance, naming guardians for their children, and things like that? You're just kind of enjoying your youth and your young children. So, estate planning at any age is necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. So you lost both your parents and then you became wards
Well,
of your
no, just
grandparents?
just one of my parents. Yeah, I
Just
lost my
one.
mother. And I went to go live with her parents for a while, my dad's parents. We just kind of bounced around, but I stayed primarily with my mother's parents.
Right. And then they passed as well.
They
So
did. Yes.
double tragedy whammy for your family. So is that what motivated you to get into estate law, seeing firsthand how it can all go pear shaped?
Definitely. Because my brother and I, even though we had family that loved us and, we had a roof over our head, I never felt solid. you know, and I felt like I had to grow up very quickly. And I'm the oldest, so I felt like I had to kind of take care of my brother. And he's so self sufficient. I really did not have to,
That's such
but
a big sister speaking.
I didn't really have to. I mean, he, grew up fine. And, but I looked at it. And now when I look at my family and he has his own family, there are just so many things that you could do even without an attorney or a coach. And so I try to give people actionable tools that they can implement on their own just to get started. Because it doesn't have to be elaborate. You don't have to have this huge trust and $1 million in insurance. There are small things you can do to just kind of protect your family as you go along.
So, what are some of those really little easy wins that we can all implement really quickly to get started on that journey?
One, you can treat estate planning like you treat your annual medical appointments. Once a year, most people go and get a physical. They get their eyes checked, they get their ears checked. Well, check in with your attorney, with your financial advisor, with your insurance agent. And when you check in, you're going to be checking for a couple of things. One, to make sure that your beneficiaries are updated, because I have people that come in, they're on their second, maybe third marriage. and they don't always have their stuff updated. And I have had a couple of clients who husband and wife has passed away, and the name on their policies was the ex-spouse, or the name that's titled for a vehicle or a home, investment property, or other securities is jointly titled with the ex-spouse. And so that causes a lot of problems. When you are a blended family, you may come into a relationship and both of you may have your own children, and you may or may not have children together. So just thinking about things like that. But that's the first thing. It's just, putting together an annual appointment to go see your professionals. Thing number two is keeping an inventory or a list of what you own. And you want to basically divide it in two ways: personal use, and if you have a business, business use. And so those are just two of the major things, because once you have that list together and you're visiting your professionals, they're going to guide you on some things that you can do. And third, kind of know the lingo. Don't just go in and sit down and think your attorney is going to read your mind, or your accountant. You need to kind of have a way to tell them what it is you're looking to do, what that end result needs to be. So I tell people, just kind of educate yourself, because you don't want to go to a foot doctor if your chest is hurting. So you need to know the type of attorney, the type of financial professional that you need to go see to accomplish your goals.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't want to be running off to a conveyancer or something, do we, for our estate planning? And I have seen wills that have been put together by conveyancers.
Yes.
They're not
Yeah.
quite fit for purpose, or, yeah, anyway. So I think really important, maybe if we do a bit of a dive into documents for while we're living. So maybe things like guardianship, powers of attorney, how they work, and then the documents that rule when we're dead, such as wills. Can you just break down the purpose of those documents and when we use each one of those?
Okay, so one document that people don't think a lot about, but they need while you're living, is executing a HIPAA form before you are incapacitated. A HIPAA form just gives someone authorization to get your medical records. And so it can be used for a couple of things. Like, say, for instance, you're hit, in a car accident, and your attorney or your family needs to get your medical records. That's one document. Also, a living will and a healthcare power of attorney, which they also may refer to as an advanced healthcare directive. So those documents kind of work together. The living will expresses if you want to be put on a ventilator, if you want a feeding tube, if you want to be resuscitated. Those are just some of your basic wishes. And then your healthcare power of attorney is a person or persons who will make healthcare decisions around that document. So anything that's not stated in that document, they basically can make the decision. Now, a question that I always get: what if these documents conflict and they, bump heads? Who makes the decision? Well, that's why you talk to the professional that prepared it. But generally, I tell people that if you are in your right mind, or you know exactly what you want when you're executing your living will, I would say let that document control, because you know exactly what you want. The person or persons that you designate for your healthcare power of attorney, they may want to just come and visit you at the hospital as a vegetable every Sunday, rub your hands, sing songs, and you may want to go on to glory. So, just make sure that when you're talking through those decisions, you specify who you want to make the final decision.
Yeah, I think the ones for while we're alive often get sort of taken for granted. In Australia, we've got quite similar, the enduring power of attorney for when we lose capacity to make our financial and medical decisions. And we've got the advanced care directives as well. And in Australia, they differ state by state. I don't know if that's the same in the States or if it's under federal law there.
Well, no, it is state by state. And one other document, because the healthcare power of attorney is different than the general durable power of attorney, and that document basically is for every other decision outside of healthcare. So, that's also a living document. And in most states here, we have to record it before we can actually use it. And we record that in the state that the person lives in, so that notice goes to everybody basically that, hey, this person has designated Amanda or Scherrie to handle their affairs for them. And you get
Yeah.
to
Do they
choose.
also have the facility there where if that one person isn't able to or passes before, that you can nominate, well, if that person's not there, then I do this person. We can choose two or three alternates if that person can't. So we've got some options if things go wrong.
Oh, exactly. And not so much if they can't, they may decide they don't want to.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you get the person that's closest to you that you want that person to make the decision, they may not desire to make the decision. It may be too hard. So definitely, nominate one, preferably two other people who can act as alternates.
Yeah, and the ruling from the grave, so the will. So once we finally pass, all these documents work when we can't make our own decisions, and then we've passed, and the executor of our estate takes over. Is it the same in America where some assets aren't covered through the estate? So our 401k or our superannuation don't standard form part of our estate. Jointly owned homes don't form part of our estate. So most people think the will covers everything, where that's not true either. Is that the same where you are?
Well, pretty much here, the will can cover everything with the exception, absolutely, of insurance that passes outside of the will. Now, state to state, depending on the state law, there are some things that do not. But as a general rule, everything would be in your will if it's named in the will. If it's not named in the will, then there's some other, some fancy things that you can do to have it included. What I like to share with people, because I'm a big proponent for trust. With a trust, you can have something that's called a pour over will, which basically during your lifetime, you can still control everything in your trust, but you have what's called a pour over will. And it has what's called a magic wand provision. So every single thing that you did not put in your trust, you can have this magic wand put everything into the trust through a pour over will at the time that you pass away. So that way, you can kind of control your assets, but it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
So when people don't have these things set up because it's in the I'm going to get this done one of these days, it's in my too hard basket, and we don't, is it a case where we see something like a Britney Spears where, look, you've lost capacity, you don't have a document here, we're going to place a conservatorship on you, we're forcing the you to be looked after by someone else, we hope they'll do the right thing by you? Is that very common? I think over here we call it guardianship, so conservatorship. Is that very common when people lose capacity and don't have arrangements in place?
Well, we can do a whole segment on Britney Spears, but
That's a yeah, that's a rabbit hole, that one.
there's a lot to unpack. Excuse me. So the conservatorships that I see the most of, and look, I'm getting a little hoarse. Excuse me one second.
You're right.
Most of the conservatorships that we see here are for medical incapacity. But in Mississippi, where I'm located, you also can have a guardianship for an adult or for a minor. And it just really depends on what you need it for. In Britney Spears' case, allegedly, and I have to, do the air quotes for allegedly, she was unable to make decisions on her own. I don't think they claimed that she had a medical issue. So, yes, those are used a lot for those. I would argue that Kanye needs one, but that's a whole nother episode as well. Um, but yes, conservatorships, and you can even, before you need a conservatorship, you can actually name in your living documents, if I were to need a conservatorship, these are the people that I would appoint. Because as you see in Britney Spears' case, she bumped heads with her parents all the time. And so if she had had an option about who her conservator was, if she needed one, I think she probably would have chosen someone else.
Yeah. So they're I suppose the basic estate planning documents. What other structures are there? We talked earlier a bit about trust. So for people who are building wealth, what's the benefit of putting some of our wealth into a trust?
Okay. So I'm going to give you the classic attorney answer, then I'm going to unpack it for you. It depends.
I love it. It's my favorite answer in finance.
It depends. Um, I try to look at things from two different sides, and we start with the need for anonymity or no anonymity, and then we look at things like asset protection versus generational wealth. And so when you kind of look at it from those lenses, you kind of know where to start. Most of the people that I work with are entrepreneurs, they have businesses. So I try to start them out with a 3 entity structure for asset protection. And when I say entity, it's almost like building a house. The roof may be a trust, the frame may be a holding company, and then the foundation may be a combination of operating companies and insurance. And so that is like the foundation that we kind of work from. But it depends on your needs. If you need anonymity, you may have more than one trust. You may, if you have a business, you may have more than one LLC, and some of those may be here in the States. We have some states that do not require you to actually list the members. So we have places like Wyoming, Nevada, and Delaware where you can own a company and you don't have to disclose the members. So, but if your brand is dependent on that, like for instance, everybody knows that Kim Kardashian has some connection to Skims, and that's a benefit. She wants people to know that she's affiliated with Skims. But if you are someone who has real estate holdings or other things, and you don't necessarily want people to know, we may utilize some sort of LLC or a trust for those purposes.
With the shares that you own in a company in the States, often here in Australia, we can will those shares through our estate documents. It's something a lot of people forget to do, will their shares in a trust or put successor director arrangements in place, especially, I mean, I've got a couple of companies myself. I'm the sole director. I've had to put in place that if anything happens to me, I'd like my husband to take over those things. Is that something a lot of people remember to do? Is it something you do through your will, or is it separate again? How does that work to protect the wealth in your trusts and companies?
That is such a great question. And literally, it is one of the top two things that I see in my practice. Um, in the States, it matters if you are a single member LLC or a multi member LLC, because if you're single member, your shares are handled differently in your state if you do not set up those provisions. And there are so many people that are solopreneurs, mompreneurs, or just people that don't have entities at all. They're sole proprietors. And when the sole proprietor passes away, the business goes too because they are the business. Well, if you have a single member LLC, it passes through your estate just like you do not have a will if you do not have a plan for those shares. So I tell people, try to use a belt and suspender type approach to it. One, you want what I call a titanium operating agreement. And what is titanium? It's super strong. It has all these great provisions and all the what ifs and but ifs that you can imagine that actually tell people what's important. So you definitely want to have a very strong operating agreement that outlines what happens to your shares. And then that's the belt. And then you want to put on suspenders and you want to name in your, testamentary documents, your will or your trust, what happens to those. And you want to direct people to those provisions. So yeah, that is one of the top two things that are left out in estate planning a lot.
Mm. I know bloodline trusts are gaining a lot of popularity now. There's a case of a girlfriend of mine recently. Poppy used to trade in shares, and I thought, good for you, Poppy. You've done well. You've got this little hobby. Found out Poppy had $11 million from the shares that he'd been putting aside and reinvesting over the years. All of a sudden, that became massive. So Poppy's only got one daughter, and the mother had struggled all her life. Her partner had been an accountant. They'd just made ends meet, had three beautiful children who are now all in their 40s. They have a super successful elder daughter who moved to the States, ran a multi-million-dollar company, had a husband and six kids. Marriage is over, business now suffering, in a same-sex partnership. Life's just imploded, business is going difficult. Daughter number two, still happily married with a few kids. The son is what they call a stay-at-home son with a Russian girlfriend. So three very, very different situations. So we discussed how a bloodline trust can work to protect mum getting all the money. If her husband left her, he'd be now entitled to probably half of that estate. Then she's got the three children with, relationships that may or may not be long term. So, and then, there's 9 or 10 grandchildren. So a bloodline trust can put things in place that the Russian girlfriend can't come in on that. The new same-sex partner might not be able. It's protected for that bloodline. I suppose the royal family is like the perfect example of,
Yes.
we've got Her Majesty the Queen, we've got the children, but, there's this very strict, this is how it works. It goes to Charles, it goes to William, it goes to George. So it's that line of succession of how you want things to go. Are they becoming more popular? I don't know. Do they have a different name in America, a bloodline or a family trust?
Yeah. And there are so many different types, but Generally, we call them common trust or dynasty trust, and there are a couple different variations of them. But yes, and that's one thing that I share with people. If there is a large estate, and the estate does not have to be an inherited estate. A lot of people are leaving life insurance proceeds not to their kids, but to a trust, and they're having those divvied out at certain intervals in the children's lives. So instead of actually giving them an outright distribution, because I share with people all the examples that you gave, what happens when part of that trust becomes part of a marital dissolution agreement, a divorce? What happens when little Johnny's girlfriend swindles him out of his, inheritance? And so, yes, if you have anything, and it doesn't really have to be substantial, it just may be grandma's house that's been in the family for the last 70 years, and you want to keep grandma's house in the family. So, yeah, those are becoming more common.
Mm, good ideas, aren't they? One of the, again, it depends for the family. You talk about the opportunity we have while we're alive of building a moat around our assets and our plan with our estate planning and trusts. What does this moat look like, and what's the purpose of building that? I know the old beautiful castle with the moat was for protection. Guessing
Yeah.
it's the same thing. So how does that work now?
Exact same thing. Similar to the three entity structure. We just look at everything that you have and we figure out a way to get it to the people that you want to have it in the event that you pass away or you are incapacitated. That's all it is. Because what does it do? If you have a business, it makes you look judgment proof. If you have individual assets, you have those titled one so that while you're alive, you're paying the least amount of insurance and you have protection set up so that if you expire quickly, that those assets are set to go to who they need to go to. So what does that look like? Well, some people don't need a will because if all you have is a house and a car, in some states, you have what's called transfer on death deeds or life estate deeds. And I give you my house while I'm alive, but for my lifetime, I reserve the right to live there. And once I pass away, there's a form with like a nominal fee here, like maybe $26, that my car goes to whoever I want it to go to. So for the cost of deed preparation and filing that fee, you see how much money you've saved in terms of hiring an attorney. And when you pass away, everything goes where you want it to go. And during your lifetime, no one was able to touch it because you appear to be judgment proof.
So I'm getting one of the big messages is because things can be, whether US or Australian or wherever, complicated and based on your geographical place of residence, the best thing to do is seek out someone in your area who specialises in your state or county for the law to get it right,
Exactly.
and find someone who specialises in what you're looking for.
Yes, but not someone singular. I tell people, just like it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a team. I'm the most successful working with clients who have a team. And when I say a team, I mean they have an insurance agent, they have an accountant, and those are just kind of minimal. And this is whether or not you have a business, because most people have an accountant to prepare their taxes. So if I'm talking to your other people, your team, we're more informed on how to best perform for you. So, yeah, if you have people where you live who are familiar with the laws and then familiar with what you have going on, because if Sally has been preparing your taxes for the last 20 years, she knows that if you try to get a business, even though I may have a great legal structure for you, she can like give me the heads up. Hey, Scherrie, well, Sally's been taking a loss over here. Oh, that's simple. We need to, do an S corp for Sally. Or Sally needs another LLC. She needs a management company. And so when your team is able to communicate and we know what your situation is, everybody wins.
Yeah, I find that a lot with my clients. I'm like, look, I'm more than happy to work in with your accountant or your attorney, make sure we're ticking all the boxes. I mean, what a beautiful thing to think I've got this team working for me. They're all, working in my best interest. Yes, they're professionals who do what they do and do it well, but when they're all working in concert for you, because I mean, I've seen things where, the will will be put together and you're like, well, you've also got this structure over here that's not mentioned in the will. Do you need to get that done? Or, do you need me to give a quick call to your lawyer to discuss why that wasn't put in there, and the accountant again, look, would a company be a better structure for this than a trust in these circumstances? So I think if everybody's pulling for you in that boat or going the one way, I mean, you're going to be so much better off, aren't you, to get ahead.
And definitely, and some people think that it's expensive. Well, most of these people you're already using at some point during the year anyway. All you're doing now is just kind of consolidating your efforts. And it really takes a lot off of you because if I'm preparing your will and I already know that you have a financial advisor, they're like, well, Scherrie, Sally didn't tell you. She just, purchased another $100,000 in stocks. We need to see where that fits into her estate plan. And so, these are the things that we do when we're working together with your permission to put your plan together.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the perception is this could be really dear to do. But I think if you view it as an investment, it could be really expensive not to do it. If everyone's pulling in a different direction, it's all gone wrong. You're going, well, you didn't put where you want the shares in the company to go, and you haven't taken account of that insurance, and that one's out of the estate and this one's in the estate. The children were minors when you did this, now they're adults. That changes the tax consequences. So, yeah, having people assist who know what they're doing, because none of us can keep it on top of everything. I mean, with regulation, legislation, constant changes. Yeah, I think personally, better to outsource to the professionals to know what they're doing. Scherrie, thanks for sharing your family story. Are there any final tips to our listeners who are sort of thinking, look, yeah, I know I should do that, and yes, it's in my too hard basket? What's a really good kick in the pants or a reminder or encouragement to actually make the phone call and go, yeah, I've really got to do this?
Well, I tell people all the time, consider the cost of inaction. What is it costing you to do nothing? And it can cost you a lot. We don't know the day or the hour that we're going to expire. So, are we prepared? Is our family prepared to handle our estate and all the things that come with the estate at the time that they're grieving us? So, just, play big faster. Put together a plan today. Does not have to be elaborate, but definitely have a plan.
Yeah, great advice. One other thing that I'd like to add is I find that families who've had the discussions openly with their children before they pass, these are our wishes. Most people think, oh, we can't talk about that. We're opening a can of worms. We'll just let them deal with it after we go. I find that those who've been open and honest and shared with the family, these are our wishes. It seems then everybody has the expectation of, well, that's what mum and dad wanted. We knew that. They were clear about that. It does make it a little bit easier when, well, the will said exactly that. We always knew that was the case. Do you find there's less chance then of the infighting and the vultures coming out to roost on the carcass, so to speak, if
Oh,
everyone's on the same page first?
definitely. We should not make talking about mortality taboo. It should be just an open discussion because we all have an expiration date. So let's talk about how we're going to handle that.
Yeah, I think being open, honest, and I do know clients who think, oh, look, if I make a will, I'm probably going to die. I'm going to jinx myself. I'm like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard, but okay. But
Well,
people
I
do
hear
have
a lot
that,
too. Yeah,
yeah, lots of that taboo of if I talk about death, it's going to happen. So I think getting over that and understanding that all these things, these making these provisions is actually a beautiful act of love for those left behind. There's
yes.
not the fighting. There's not the, I don't know what she wanted. Who does Auntie Betty leave that ring to me? She's promised it to four of us. I don't know what to do. So no, so there's all that kind of stuff that goes on. I mean, my great grandmother did that. I think she promised the same ring to like four members of the family. That's not cool.
Not at
So
all,
I
Grandma.
I didn't get it. That's all good. It doesn't matter. But it was just it. I just find that people who are open and honest and have the conversation, like you said, the only thing certain is death and taxes. We know we're going to drop off at some stage, and if we do want to do that ruling from the grave and making sure our wishes are carried out, I think it's a beautiful thing to let people know, look, this is what I'd like to happen. This is what I've put in my plan. Can you guys help me make that happen? So yeah,
Exactly.
makes life a little easier in the end. Well, Scherrie, thank you so much for joining me. It's been lovely having a chat. And like I said, not the usual meet the experts how to get wealthy, but I think the protection of that wealth and making sure it doesn't dissipate very quickly or get eaten up in attorney fees. I love you, but I don't want to pay your fees. So
Exactly. I will accept it just in case.
But yeah, if we could just pay the estate fees and go with that, that's a lot easier, isn't it? So beautiful. Thank you again for your time. Can you tell us a little bit more about Play Big Faster if anyone is interested in connecting with you? And I will get your details for the show notes too.
Definitely. We have a lot of free resources. I have a Facebook group, and we are actually in the group sharing asset protection tips. People are raising their hands and offering advice on things that work for them. So I invite people to look at that. It's the Play Big Faster community in Facebook. Also, twice a year I do a webinar, and so the webinar you actually leave with a blueprint. It's a free webinar, and our next one is in January 2024. I take you through 4 steps on how to put together a plan. So when you leave the hour webinar, you have a blueprint for what a plan looks like. Now it's up to you to execute, but you will have a plan for it. And also, if you just want more information about some of the other resources, you can contact me at or look at my website, www.scherrieprince.com. Just scherrieprince.com.
Thanks, Sheree. Is the resources and the discussions you have purely for a US audience, or the information discussed would be relevant for an international audience as well?
It will definitely be relevant for an international audience. And we have people from all over the world in the Facebook group. It's really just a very eclectic group of individuals who recognize that asset protection is important. And so we're just kind of in there sharing tips and getting great information.
And then go to someone local to implement your plan
Yes.
to get the right advice for you. Perfect. Again, Sherry, thank you so, so much for sharing. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
You as well. Thank you.